Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really wild, fascinating paradox that's basically hiding in plain sight. We're going to look at why the exact same madness that sometimes completely destroys individual creators might actually be the one ingredient humanity needs to survive.
To really wrap our heads around this, let's start with a pretty provocative thought about the actual price of immortality. Think about the tragic 27 Club. You know, those famous musicians who passed away right at their absolute peak. Before joining that club, Amy Winehouse famously sang the words on your screen. It actually raises a pretty chilling question, right? Did rehab seem so unattractive because returning to quote-unquote normalcy was basically a roadblock to immortality? Because for some of these truly unique individuals, it seems like the only way to remain a forever god in the public eye is to, well, completely avoid becoming a functioning everyday mortal.
So here's our quick roadmap for today. First, kings, gods, and founders. Second, the monopolist versus the artist. Third, in defense of extreme founders. Fourth, four futures for humanity. And finally, going from 0 to 1. All right, let's jump right into section 1. Kings, gods, and founders. The myth and madness of creators. You know, as a society, we absolutely love to build up what you could call American royalty from absolutely nothing. We literally worship them. We've got Elvis as the king of rock, Michael Jackson as the king of pop, Britney Spears as the pop princess. But here's the catch. This worship demands a sacrifice. We elevate these people to astronomical heights, and then we kind of actively watch them derail. Elvis died alone. Michael Jackson became this erratic shell of his former self. Britney faced those intense, highly publicized scandals. We build them up to be more than human, but then we totally revel in their inevitable, very human fall. It's a crazy cycle.
Now, this cycle of intense worship and eventual pity, it definitely isn't just for pop stars. It heavily applies to extreme tech founders too. Take the legendary aviation pioneer Howard Hughes, for example. In just an unbelievable display of audacity, he actually paid his lawyer to stand up in federal court and argue that Hughes was a man to whom you cannot apply the same standards as you can to you and me. I mean, he explicitly wanted to invite comparisons to a Greek god. And the craziest part, neither the judge nor the jury even disputed it.
Hughes' whole life just perfectly captures this Icarus-like trajectory. I mean, look at these early achievements. They are absolutely staggering. He built a radio transmitter at age 11, was making massive hit movies by his 30s, and was setting absolute airspeed records. Just incredible stuff. But then that 1946 plane crash was the massive turning point. If he had died right then, he'd probably be remembered purely as this unblemished heroic figure. But instead, he survived. He became addicted to painkillers and ended up spending his last 30 years in self-imposed solitary confinement. His quirky, crazy act morphed into a deeply tragic reality, completely shifting the public's perception from absolute awe straight to pity.
So why do we put up with this? That brings us to section 2, the monopolist versus the artist, and why we tolerate the madness.
Let's contrast two completely opposite tech titans who came up in the exact same era. On one side, you have Bill Gates, the ultimate nerd monopolist. He was a ruthless businessman who kept his products open, but fundamentally just wanted to run the world. And then on the other side, you've got Steve Jobs, the barefoot artist. He vastly preferred closed systems and was just obsessively focused on making great products above all else. I mean, they literally could not be more different in their styles. Yet, both of them were these weird insider-outsiders who possessed a completely unique, intense drive that pushed their respective companies to just unmatched, world-changing achievements. And Steve Jobs' career specifically is just a brilliant illustration of the completely irreplaceable value of a founder. Remember, his eccentricities actually got him kicked out of his own company back in 1985, and Apple really floundered without him. By 1997, being run by a bunch of standard corporate professionals, it was practically on the verge of bankruptcy. But then Jobs returns, right? And within a few short years, he introduces the iPod, the iPhone, and eventually turns Apple into the single most valuable company in the world. You simply cannot formulaically apply that kind of creative turnaround using a polite committee of standard executives. It just doesn't happen.
Which leads us nicely into section 3, in defense of extreme founders and the real value of the irreplaceable individual.
What we just talked about illustrates a major paradox in how we think about business. See, we tend to picture modern companies as these sleek, highly rational, impersonal bureaucracies. And sure, those bureaucracies can outlast a single human lifetime, but they operate on incredibly short quarter-to-quarter time horizons. Conversely, the companies that actually drive true leap-forward technological progress, they function way more like extreme, founder-led feudal monarchies.
You have a unique founder making highly authoritative decisions, inspiring fierce personal loyalty, and actually planning ahead for decades. And that long-term vision is an absolute requirement if you want to push beyond just tiny incremental changes and actually achieve massive breakthroughs.
But as you can probably guess, these founders walk a seriously dangerous tightrope. While society deeply needs their peculiar brilliance, they aren't actually divine. They aren't independent prime movers, operating completely separately from the rest of us. The single greatest danger for a founder is to become so absolutely certain of their own myth that they basically lose their minds. Mistaking the crowd's worship for absolute truth is pretty much a one-way ticket to madness. But, and this is a big but, the exact opposite is just as dangerous for civilization, losing all sense of myth entirely, and mistaking cynical, corporate disenchantment for actual wisdom.
All right, let's zoom out to the macro level with Section 4, 4 futures for humanity. Are we looking at stagnation or singularity?
So if extreme founders are the ones who drive all of our true progress, what exactly happens to human civilization if they just disappear and progress completely stops? The philosopher Nick Bostrom gives us 4 distinct possibilities for the distant future. Scenario 1 is recurrent collapse. Now, the ancients actually viewed history exactly this way, as this endless alternating cycle of prosperity and ruin. However, because foundational knowledge is just so globally widespread today, a complete total collapse back to the Dark Ages, followed by a slow recovery, it actually seems pretty unlikely.
Well, that leads us right to the second path, which is the plateau. Honestly, this is pretty much conventional wisdom today. It's the belief that poorer countries will eventually catch up, and the entire world will peacefully converge on this comfortable plateau of sameness. But here's the massive catch that people miss. Without new technology to relieve the pressure, fierce global competition for strictly scarce resources makes this plateau incredibly unstable. It is almost impossible to maintain that balance indefinitely without something giving away.
And if that global plateau does give way and erupts into conflict over those increasingly scarce resources, well, the sheer destructive power of modern weaponry leads us straight to our third possibility: extinction. It's a devastating scenario, obviously. In this case, there is no recovery. There's just no human future of any kind left to even consider.
Which leaves us with the fourth and definitely the most dramatic scenario: takeoff, often called the singularity. Now, this path relies entirely on those extreme founders we were discussing earlier. It relies on them creating new technologies that are so powerful, like, say, superhuman artificial intelligence, that they fundamentally transcend our current human limits. This accelerating takeoff would lead to a future that is so radically different, and hopefully better than our present, that it honestly completely defies description.
So where does that leave us? That brings us to our final part, Section 5, going from 0 to 1, the call to action.
Listen, the future isn't just going to happen all on its own just because of some traced exponential curves or historical trends we plotted on a graph. The stark choice we literally face today is between nothing or something. It is entirely up to us. We absolutely cannot take for granted that the future will automatically be better than today. We have to actively, intentionally work to create it by doing entirely new things.
So, the truly crucial question resting squarely on our shoulders right now is this: how will you find singular ways to create the new things that will take humanity from 0 to 1? Are you ready to look at the world anew, to see it as fresh and strange as the ancients saw it, so that you can go out and create that next massive breakthrough? Because ultimately, when you look at the grand sweep of history, that is the absolute only way we preserve and elevate our future.